Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 2024 electoral map in a scenario if Donald Trump wins the popular vote. But before we get started, make sure you guys are subscribed, click the bell so you don't miss out on my content, press like button, share this video. If you are interested, we have memberships, so you can find a link to that in the description section as well. So according to the Nate Silver forecast model, which they used to previously be on 538 until they left and created their own model, Donald Trump has roughly a 61.6% chance of winning the electoral college, surpassing 270 electoral votes, which would give him the presidency, obviously. And Kamala Harris's chance is currently sitting at roughly 38%. And so basically, he is really favored. It really depends on which model you take a look at. But in reality, you compare where Kamala Harris is polling at today, compare that to where Joe Biden was polling at in 2020, combine that with Hillary Clinton in 2016, in which Harris is doing worse than Clinton and Joe Biden, on top of the overestimate of the Democratic candidate. Harris is polling worse against Hillary Clinton, and keep in mind she was vastly overestimated. So if you apply that polling error, realistically, Donald Trump is actually favored in numerous of these swing states. But obviously, the election is not based off of, I would say polling errors. But you take a look at the popular vote probability for each of these two candidates, which is what this video is going to be based off of, as basically what the electoral map would look like if Donald Trump were to win the popular vote by a narrow margin, but he still would win it by like within 1 percentage point. I would say in this scenario, she currently has a 58%, and Donald Trump has roughly a 41% chance of winning the national popular vote nationwide. Now, 41 may seem low, but this actually, that's a high amount. That's a high number for Donald Trump. 41% for him winning the popular vote. That's a great chance, because if you take a look at 2020, that chance was significantly less, like literally in single digits. In 2016, his chance of winning the popular vote was literally in single digits, you guys, and now it's all the way up, skyrocketing to 41%. That is high numbers for Trump, especially with the popular vote. So Donald Trump, on average, is getting nearly 278 electoral votes, and Kamala Harris is barely getting past 260, according to the Nate Silver forecast model. And predicted popular vote share, Donald Trump is expected to get 49% exactly. Kamala Harris's lead is only up by 0.9, less than a percentage point, with the popular vote. So it's realistically, Donald Trump has a great shot at actually winning the popular vote in this election, considering that he was vastly underestimated in 2020. At this current point in time, back in 2020, Biden was supposed to win it by 9 points. He ended up winning it by like 4 on election day. That's a polling error of roughly 5 percentage point shift to the right. And then you take a look at a brand new poll just released from, I believe, New York Times and Siena, in which in a race matchup between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, they're currently tied in the popular vote nationwide at 47 to 47%. That's in a two-way race. Now, when you include the candidates, it is still tied at 46 to 46%. So whether it's a two-way race or with all the third-party candidates included, Cornel West and Jill Stein, does not matter. It is a tie for both of these candidates. It is evenly split. So you apply that polling error in which, let's say they do underestimate Donald Trump, just how they always do in 2016 and in 2020. So why wouldn't they again? That would make absolutely no sense if they would not underestimate Donald Trump again. Realistically, he's actually winning the popular vote. So enough talking aside, let's begin filling out this electoral map in a scenario if Donald Trump were to win the popular vote. So the states filled in yellow are going to be considered the swing and battleground competitive states. So I do want to get out some of these states out of the way that I don't think will be too competitive. Like Colorado, I do expect Kamala to win it by roughly 10 percentage points, which is actually less of a margin than Joe Biden's margin of victory in the state back in the 2020 election. This state's actually getting bluer. It is trending towards the left, especially considering that Tim Walz is on her ticket. I do think that he can really help in that aspect. And speaking of Tim Walz, obviously he's the governor of Minnesota, and so with that being said as well, I do think that it's going to be likely for Kamala Harris. Obviously, you have that home state advantage for the VP that really can go to Kamala Harris's benefit ultimately at the end of the day. Also, the suburbs here are really trending towards the left, especially with the women vote as well. And Minneapolis is really trending towards the left in Minnesota. I do expect her to win by probably around 6 to 7 percentage points on election day. And I also do think that New Mexico is going to be likely for Kamala Harris this time around. I think she'll win it by probably around 7 points, similar to her margin in Minnesota. I do think Trump can make somewhat gains among Hispanic voters, but Albuquerque is a Democratic stronghold county. It has a lot of white liberals. It's hard for Trump to overcome the votes. And there, I think it's pretty much a lost cause at this point. And then you have the likely states for Donald Trump. On the other hand, I do think Texas is going to be likely for him. He would probably win his state by about 8 to 9 percentage points if he were to win the popular vote, which I think is very realistic. I think he can possibly win the popular vote, as well as Florida is another lost cause for the Democratic Party. The entirety of the state has totally abandoned the Democratic Party. And even Miami-Dade County, it flipped from blue to red to DeSantis in the midterms in 2022. And especially Hispanic Americans, Cuban Americans specifically, are really trending towards the right in this state. Florida is going to go to Trump comfortably by probably maybe even close to 9 points if he were to win the popular vote. So now that we have the likely states out of the way, moving on to the lean states for both of these candidates, starting off with Kamala Harris. I do think Virginia is going to be lean for her, as well as New Hampshire. Those will be the two lean states for her in this scenario if Donald Trump were to win the popular vote by probably around 1 percentage point. Now, if you actually take a look at what the governor, Glenn Youngkin, has been doing, he actually endorsed Donald Trump. He's very popular. He has a high approval rating in the state of Virginia as a Republican, and a pretty much blue, I would say, swing state. It's still considered a competitive battleground state, but it's still a little bit more, Democratic than in other states, I shall say. But still, Glenn Youngkin is trying to mandate paper ballot voting only on election day. He's trying to mandate that. And if that's successful, that could really go to Donald Trump's benefit, and it means the state would be called much, much faster. And I think it will narrow up the margin, make it a whole lot closer, especially considering that would help Donald Trump with the popular vote massively, but still not going to be enough, obviously, for him to win. Therefore, Harris is still going to win Virginia by lesser of a margin than you would originally expect. Keep in mind that Donald Trump is actually defeating Joe Biden in Virginia, when obviously Joe Biden was still in the race, by a margin of 0.4% on average at the very last moment right before Biden dropped out. If you take a look at RCP, on the RCP averages, Real Clear Politics, Donald Trump was up on average in the state of Virginia. So this state can very well be in play, but I do think Kamala has gained some ground. Therefore, she's going to win by probably 4 percentage points if I were to make an estimated margin guess. And then you have New Hampshire, has a lot of college-educated voters, and that voter group block specifically really does well for Democrats, especially considering Tim Walz, specializes in education as the governor of Minnesota. I think a lot of those New Hampshire voters would like that, and I think New Hampshire is still a very blue state. So with that being said, I think Kamala would still win New Hampshire by probably around 5 to 6 percentage points on election day or election night, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. And surprisingly, the 2020 polling in the state of New Hampshire was actually spot on. It was accurate. It only overestimated Joe Biden by like 1 point. So realistically, Kamala is still going to be the favored in this state. And now the lean states for Donald Trump, if he were to win the popular vote, I think is going to be Nevada. Sorry, I'm going to fill it in red. And also Arizona and Georgia, as well as North Carolina. And I forgot to fill out Iowa and Ohio. I do think Iowa is going to be safe for Donald Trump. I expect him to surpass double digits, obviously, like a margin of like 11 to 12 percentage points. Actually, a highly rated pollster, an accurate one, had him up by 18, so I won't be shocked if he does get, somewhere around there, that margin. And I think Ohio would go to him by close to 10 points, maybe like 9.5 if I were to make a guess. Obviously, just like Tim Walz from Minnesota, you have J.D. Vance of Ohio, the home states, that would really go to Donald Trump's benefit electorally. So Ohio's not going to be close at all. It is a very red state. So now we go back to the lean states for Donald Trump, starting off with Nevada. If he were to win a popular vote, I expect him to win the state of Nevada by around 3 percentage points. I do think he will be able to flip Washoe County, as well as have skyrocket turnout in the Vegas area, obviously Clark County, among Hispanic voters as well. That would be key to his victory. I think he can do exactly that. The state is shifting towards the right. And as for Arizona, this state's actually, in terms of futuristic-wise, it's getting bluer. They elected Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs for the first time since, I believe, 2009. And they also have a Democratic Senator, obviously, Mark Kelly. So statewide, Arizona is very blue. Don't be surprised if they keep electing Democrats in the future. But as for 2024, we're not talking about 2028, guys. We're not talking about 2032. But for 2024 specifically, I do think Arizona is going to flip back to Donald Trump, considering that this is a border state. Obviously, the border crisis is a major issue. It's immigration is a losing issue for Kamala Harris. She can't address that whatsoever. And I don't think Arizona voters would like Kamala as their president. with that being said, I think Trump's going to win Arizona by a couple percentage points, probably 2. If I had to make a guess, I do expect him to flip Maricopa County. And even if he doesn't flip Maricopa, still, he can still win. If she probably gets it by like 1 point, that's not going to be enough for her. Because like Biden still, almost lost Arizona while getting Maricopa by nearly 2 points. And so even if Harris may win Maricopa by, like, let's just say 1 point, that's not going to be enough for her to win the state. She can still win Maricopa, but still lose the state entirety. And then as for Georgia, Biden got lucky, I believe, in this state. Obviously, got a high turn among African-American voters. I don't expect the same thing to go for Kamala Harris. A lot of them are actually switching over to Donald Trump. But still, I think it's going to be very, very close. You take a look at recent polling in the state of Georgia, it's going to be extremely close. But even on 538, which vastly overestimates Democrats all the time against Donald Trump, has Donald Trump winning the state of Georgia by almost 1 percentage point. And I do think he's going to win Georgia by probably 3 points at this current time, and especially if he wins the popular vote, I do think he would win it by 3 points. And obviously, similar to Virginia, the governor, Brian Kemp, who also endorsed Donald Trump, by the way, is trying to pass, election day laws in which all absentee ballots have to be put in by 8 p.m. and they won't be accepted any later. That means the state would be called faster, and that would really go to Donald Trump's benefit. And then you have North Carolina, in which there has been recent news in which Mark Robinson, who is running for governor, who is doing very poorly, by the way, Josh Stein is destroying him in the polls, is facing a ton of scandals, and it really could hurt Donald Trump. But still, I think this state's a very red state, and I think Donald Trump would win North Carolina by around 3 percentage points, especially if he were to win the popular vote by roughly 1 point. And then you have some of these Rust Belt states before we end off this video. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That's, could be the deciding factor of who ultimately wins this state. As we all know, Pennsylvania is called the tipping point state, as we all know it. Let's start off with Wisconsin. I do think Trump's going to win it by a lean margin of probably 1.5 points, somewhere in between 1 to 2 percentage points. That's the margin for him if he were to win the popular vote. I expect him to flip Door County, as he, he's expected to flip Door County. It only went to Biden by a very narrow margin of like 1 point. And the main reason why Biden had won this state was because of Milwaukee. If Harris does not have enough turnout in Milwaukee, or if her performance is not in par or in line with Joe Biden's 2020 performance in Milwaukee County, then she's probably not going to win this state, and I don't expect her to have high turnout. And it's going to come down to those 20,000 voters that Biden had originally won the state by a margin of 0.6%, which, by the way, is smaller than Donald Trump's victory in 2016 in the state of Wisconsin. And Wisconsin voted to the right. Keep in mind, Wisconsin is the reddest Rust Belt state of the three. It voted to the right of both Pennsylvania and Michigan in 2020, 2016, and the Obama era as well. So a lot of polls are showing that Pennsylvania, surprisingly, is actually going to be more red than Wisconsin in this election. I just don't believe that. Wisconsin literally always votes to the right of Pennsylvania, which is why I think the polls are absolutely bizarre. And Donald Trump is going to have to win Michigan, whether you like it or not, if he wants to win the popular vote. Right off the bat, if he does not win Michigan, if Harris wins Michigan, I do not think he's going to win the popular vote. So he's going to have to win this by probably, even if it's like less than a percentage point, like 0.5, for example, he still very well can win the popular vote. Keep in mind that, Hillary Clinton only won the popular vote by 2 percentage points, and which is like very close. And Donald Trump, by the way, received more votes in the 2020 election than he did in 2016. And considering that Kamala Harris is way less popular, she's more unpopular than Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. And by the way, she didn't even receive a single vote in the Democratic primaries. It wasn't even a primary at all. So I do think that Donald Trump very well can get like 312 electoral votes. And keep in mind that there was a large uncommitted vote in this state, 100,000 people voting uncommitted. And I understand that was against Joe Biden. But still, it shows that there is not enough enthusiasm for Kamala in the state of Michigan. And then as for Pennsylvania, I do think that this state is going to go to Donald Trump by probably 1 to maybe 2 percentage points. This state, according to the polls on 538 and RCP, a lot of pollsters actually suggest that Pennsylvania would be the reddest state of Wisconsin and Michigan in this year's election cycle. So I do think that Trump is going to win it. I expect him to flip Erie County, which, by the way, Nikki Haley got a lot of that vote share in the Republican primaries, but it's not going to matter because she did indeed endorse Donald Trump. And then I think he's going to flip Northampton County as well. It only went to Biden by like 0.7 percentage points. And if Kamala Harris does not have, skyrocket turnout in Philadelphia and some of these, stronghold Democratic counties like Pittsburgh, and speaking of Pittsburgh, by the way, Butler County, where Trump got shot at, I think that could really drive a lot of turnout, and it's next to Pittsburgh. So I think he can really have skyrocket turnout on some of these stronghold Democratic counties that he usually does not, similar to his 2016 margin of victory in the state. And then as for Central County, Biden only had won it by like 4.5 points. I think it's going to be way closer. Doesn't mean Trump's going to win it, but still, if he can perform better, obviously, than 2020, just slightly, because Biden only won this state by like 80,000 votes, I do think Trump's on track to win Pennsylvania in 2024. He would get 312 electoral votes if he were to win the popular vote by like 1 point to Kamala Harris's 226 electoral votes. This is the map, guys. If Donald Trump were to win the popular vote, this is the exact map I think it would pan out and look like. Let me know what states you agree with or disagree with in the comment section down below. And one last final reminders to subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss out on content, press the like button, share this video, as well as we do have memberships. If you are interested, you can find a link to that in the description section. That's pretty much it. Thank you everyone for watching.